connected to his groups that he started. He started about 500 groups, so it continues today. And I thank you all for joining us this morning. He was very non-sectarian, as yogis are. No such thing as sectarianism. When you have clear consciousness, you don't realize the walls exist. Can you all hear? I know my voice is a little bit closer. I want it to be heard, but not third world dictator. Is this okay? Okay. So he was very clear to say that although the British probably did one thing, British like to go to places and put their flag in and label things that they see according to how they see it. We all do that, don't we? We label things that we see in the world according to how we see them. There was a famous story of a battleship. You know this one? I won't tell it if you already know. A battleship at midnight on the ocean. And he's going out across the ocean, looking out for anything. The captain is on the bridge and he's looking out into the dark night, the Atlantic. And he says to his first mate, he says, what's that light over there? That's another ship. Quick, signal to that ship that he has to move 20 degrees starboard. He said, otherwise he's on a collision course with us. We're a battleship, we're big and we're fast. So they have a light that can flash on and off, and it sends a Morse code message through the light. So, move 20 degrees starboard. So they wait, and a light flashes back at them. No, you move. So he flashes it again. He says, you must move, you're on a collision course. Light comes back. No, you move. You're smiling because you know the end of the story. But I haven't been here before. He says, I'm a British naval battleship. You're on a collision course. I demand that you move. Light comes back. He says, no, you move. I am a lighthouse. So this consciousness of I am a battleship is not just something that the captain had for himself, it's something that he projected out into the world. Our mind is like a projector. Like when we go to a movie theater, we're watching Tom Cruise, his Top Gun antics, or his Mission Impossible antics. We're identifying with the hero, but we're projecting out towards the screen. The projector's projecting out towards the screen, but our mind is also projecting towards the screen. The screen is blank, we project it, we fill it up with what? What you fill it up with, my dear friends, is I am Tom Cruise. All the men in the audience, I am Tom Cruise. And all the women in the audience, I am Tom Cruise's girlfriend. And when the hero jumps off the cliff with a motorbike, you're not sure if he's got a parachute. Your mouth, you're waiting, coming dry. We identify with the hero, but we create ourselves in the hero of our own movie, don't we? We want it to have a happy ending. One time I was discussing with my children because somehow or another my children got into anime, watching Japanese movies. And at the end of a Japanese movie, everybody dies. Even the hero. And that's a good movie. At the end of an American movie, the hero walks away off into the sunset, or gets the girl, or she gets him, or whatever, but the bad guy is defeated and the good guy is okay. And we're casting ourselves in the movie of our own life. So back who in the 1860s was not, there was no such thing as movies. So he said, we are, as human beings, on a path of trying to elevate our consciousness. So he describes different levels of consciousness. He says the first level of consciousness. He said, first of all, religion is a man-made attempt to understand this elevation of consciousness and put it in packaging so that it can be transferred from one place to another. But the real thing is that the consciousness must be free. He said it's a little bit like ice. When you see ice, you're seeing water, but it is in an altered state. Ice is a changed state. So he said, our consciousness at the moment is in a changed state. It's eclipsed. He said, you have another example. He said, it's like a flower. When you first see a flower as a bud, you see it as green. There's no telling what lies inside. And gradually, the little tip goes pink, and eventually you have a beautiful flower that opens up. He said, similarly, consciousness must expand. That's the purpose of human life, is to expand that consciousness so that it's full blooming. All the fragrance is released when the flower is full blooming. So to release our full potential means to embark on a path of growth, and that growth is, of course, known as yoga. So he said that the first level of consciousness, the lowest level of consciousness, is unconsciousness. The living consciousness is there, but it's eclipsed. It's covered over by sleep. And this he called sushupti. Sushupti is sleep with no dreams. Then comes the next level of consciousness, swapna. Swapna means conscious but asleep but dreaming. So something's going on. You're watching something. Who doesn't dream? Who never dreams? I know I dream. I dream a lot. Especially in the last hour before I wake up. Usually about 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm there on my motorbike. I got my girl behind me. 67, still on that motorbike. Oh, it is you. You are the girl of my dreams. Anyway, I wake up, there was no parachute. Anyway, so he said next is swapna. Next is something called jagrata. Jagrata is when you're just woken up. Now I'm from London, we came to New Jersey, we came to Atlanta. When I woke up first in Nashville, I was like, where am I? Where have I come to? Well, I walked down Broad Street yesterday and I was thinking, where the hell am I? Where am I? Yogi on Broad Street. So, where am I? So this, where am I, who am I? Your identity comes back to jagrata. Jagrata, just woken up. So next platform of consciousness is called Annamaya. Annamaya means I am food. I need food. I want food. I must have food. He has got food. I have not got food. I will take the food from him. I have got food. He has not got food. He will take the food from me. Let us fight. So really, it's babies fighting over cookies. Or it's amoebas fighting with each other over a speck of protein. Low level of consciousness. But it's consciousness. It's an individual consciousness. But the consciousness is only, where is food? Where is food? Not much else. I'm just looking, where is food? Just like yesterday, the level of consciousness is, what was? Sorry to say, it brings in a lot of money to Nashville, but what was the level of consciousness? Where is music? Where is booze?
Hot chicken.
Where's hot chicken? Hot chicken. Where's boots and hats? And where's my party bus? Yeehaw! But it's consciousness, the people were conscious. But the object of their consciousness was what? There is consciousness, and that which we are conscious of, the object of consciousness, which can either raise the consciousness or pull it down. So usually the consciousness on that level is just two things. I want something, I don't want something. Sankalpa and vikalpa. Sankalpa is I want it, I need it, must have it now. Vikalpa is I don't want it, I never want it, I never wanted it, I don't want it, it's out of my life, gone. And if you listen to the radio, whether it's country western, rock and roll, or FM pop, it's the same thing. Baby, I need you. Baby, I want you. Baby, I gotta have you. Baby, it's all over now. Got to get you out of my life. Any songs like that. Sankalpa Vikalpa. So the Sankalpa Vikalpa depends whether it's food or whether it's the breath of life. Breath of life is prana. This next level is called Pranamoya. And it's when a baby first identifies itself. And when the baby looks in the mirror, she understands that my reflection is me. How long does that take? When the babies look in the mirror and they don't know that it's not them. A year, 1 year goes by. To get from Annamaya, I must have milk, gotta have milk. You ever held a baby? Men, have you ever held a baby to your chest? You've got to be very careful if you're a bit big up top. Oh, not me, not me. Go back to mom. So to get some of us over middle-aged men, we have that problem. So to get from Annamaya to Pranamaya, I'm a separate individual that can take a year. So after Pranamaya becomes Jnanamaya. Jnanamaya means I can think. I'm a separate person. I can think differently from my mom. Come here. I don't want to. Do this. I don't want to. Don't do that, but I want to. Separate individual discretion. So the mind is not only the consciousness is not only functioning, but the consciousness is fixed to the mind. The conception of the ego is the individual. And I have will. It's called ikshana. Ikshana, I have will to do this. It's not just food that I need. It's not just individuality I have. But I'm now prepared to move towards things by telling other people in my life that I want this. So then comes the idea that, well, maybe it's not all about you. Some men, unfortunately, never get above this level. Watch out, ladies, for those men. Very selfish men. They never get above them. You fit into their life. Do we know men like that? Oh, you fit into their life, and you have to change to fit into their life. They will not change with you. So that is another type of Annamaya, but on a sort of relational level. So as we move from selfishness to selflessness, that's the ideal of human life. And it may take 40 years for an 18-year-old to turn into a 58-year-old where he gets a little bit unselfish. Sometimes in motherhood you learn pretty quickly how to be unselfish, don't you? Because you've got screaming children and they've got to be fed. You may be hungry, but as long as they're hungry, you feed them first. Absolutely have to feed them first. So women get this more than men. Men, it may take them 40 years to get to the point where maybe life would be happier. Life would be easier if I helped other people be happy, rather than using other people to make me happy. It's just like a complete battleship, midnight turnaround. You will do as I say, you will move. Okay, I'm on Lighthouse, you can make your choice. I'm not moving for anybody. So this point of turning around is Jnanamaya becomes Vijnanamaya. You've realized that you're something other than the sum total of your desires to exploit, control, enjoy, or reject. Something else going on, and that something else is called the Atma, or the inner self. And the inner self is what we sometimes call the, as you've seen on the restroom doors here, everybody look at the restroom doors, spirit, soul. Now the word soul is an English word based on a Christian conception that the soul is part of you. As in this expression, I have a stomach, I have a heart, I have kidneys, I have legs, and I have a soul. I feel it in my soul. What's the difference between you and your soul? Well, I don't know what the soul is, but I know I have one. Okay. Whereas the Vedic understanding, the understanding of the Upanishads is that you are a soul, but there's a human body wrapped around the soul. You see? It's like the soul is the real seat of consciousness, and the body is wrapped around it. The body is changing from childhood to youth, to middle age, to old age, and finally disappears. But the soul remains the same. Like the story I told the other night about the bird flying through the room. The bird flies in this window, the bird disappears through that window. But as it disappears out that window, which is called death, the bird still exists. Before the bird flies into the room, at this window, it was alive. That window we call birth, but the bird is existing before that. The phenomenal interaction between the senses and the objects of the senses is what we call life, duration of one life from birth to death. But there's so much more than that. So that area, that whole area is moving from Jnanamoya to Vijnanamoya. So Vijnanamoya means I'm doing something to hold on to the concept of myself as a spiritual being. That process we call yoga. And it's something that we do. To hold on to your health, how many hours do we spend each day? How many hours do you spend per week using your body in physical training, yoga, shooting flaming arrows upside down? How many hours? Many, many hours, isn't it? How many hours do you spend unconscious, sleeping?
56 a week.
56 hours a week, yeah.
We're lucky.
If you're lucky. How many hours do you spend shaving your legs, ladies? Hey?
Depends on the week.
How many hours? And whether there's any parties to go to. How many hours do we spend eating? How many hours do we spend on Netflix? How many hours do we spend partying? How many hours do we spend doing this and that? If you add it all up, as some people do just out of interest, you find that you spend, and none of these things, by the way, are things that we shouldn't be doing. I'm not making a judgment here. It's just that we spend a lot of time on the body. So the question is, how much time do we spend on the soul? How much time should I spend? The answer is at least some. At least some. Something. So that is usually where the process. Yoga is everything that is contacted by spirituality, which can be all of life. You can shave your legs in a really meditative state. It's possible. The whole of the Bhagavad Gita is how to do meditation while fighting. Imagine that. So, this process we know as yoga, or trying to unite the spirit within me with the greater spirit, which is above and beyond. And the North American Indians used to call that spirit Manitou. Manitou. Is it Manitou? Manitou. Manitou, yeah, Manitou. And the ancient Indians used to call it Brahman. Other people. Just yesterday we did a fire sacrifice. Now we call the oblations of ghee that are poured into the flames of the fire, we call that huta. Huta. And from that, the ancient Sanskrit language from India migrates across Europe. So Sanskrit is a sort of proto-European language. So therefore the huta becomes in Old German Gute, which means an offering unto that which is the ultimate good, or later, Gute, the ultimate good, or then it becomes Gott, which becomes God. But in Sanskrit it also has another way of evolving. For instance, fire in Sanskrit is Agni, which comes into Latin as igneo, which comes into English as ignite. You see how it's moving across the world. So then, God, or the ultimate state of being, is described as being a brilliant light. Brilliant light. This is called radiance. This is known as Diva, or Deva, the shining ones, which becomes, in the language of the country that I'm from, is called Wales. Have you heard of Wales? It's really just a small part of a state compared to America. I mean, but when a British person says, I have to drive a long, long way, you know how they say, it's a long way to go. They say, well, how far is it? Oh, it's 10 miles. When an American says we have to drive a long way, they say, we're driving from Florida to Alaska. It's like, but when a British person says, this is a long time, when we say a long time ago, we mean 3,000 years. I was in Minneapolis, and when we just got married, our honeymoon was to come to America and buy what's called the Delta ticket, the Delta pass, to go to all these different places across the world. So we were crisscrossing through Minneapolis. Minneapolis was the wheel of American transport. So we went to Minneapolis, and there was a sign saying, ancient monument. And I'm British, so I like the word ancient, ancient monument. Go and see the ancient monument of Minneapolis. So I went to the ancient monument of Minneapolis, and I was 1867. I said, where's the ancient monument? Said, this is it. The ancient monument for me is Stonehenge. 7,000 basically. Anyway, so ancient language known as Welsh, Diva becomes Diw, which means God. And in Old French, Deo, or Dieu. You see how it's migrating, slowly changing. I mean, you can trace a lot of words back to Sanskrit. The very first prayer that we did in the ceremony yesterday, where you took your hand and you placed it on the cushion, was a prayer to Mother Earth. Mother Earth in Sanskrit is Prithvi. Mother Earth in Welsh, which is 5,000 miles away from India, is Breathe. See how it's working? So sometimes, like with my mother, I said to my mother, I was 17, 18. I said, I'm getting seriously into bhakti, into yoga. She said, that's nice. I said, it's very spiritual. I'm thinking I'm going to, move into a community. She said, well, why don't you move into something, more British, more English? Why do you have to do something Indian? I said, but what do you mean? She said, well, it's from the East. She gestured with her hand, the East. And I said, Jesus was also from the Middle East. She said, no, he wasn't. I said, Mom, she held the prayer book up. She said, look, Church of England. That's our religion, son. Many years later, my wife and I, we ran a small business together with your dad, selling paintings. This is Orissa. So we go back a long way to when she was a baby. She was also comedian. But together with her father, we had a business selling oil paintings. So we would go to different companies in London, and somehow or another we run a run of shipping companies. And I went into one company headquarters, asked if they would like any oil paintings, for their offices. And while I was waiting for the manager to come, I looked at the wall, and on the wall was a map of the world. I thought, that's a very strange map of the world. See, because as a British person, everybody knows that the map of the world has Britain right in the middle. Right? That's the way it works, folks. And way out there is America, and way over there is Russia. That's how it works. That's what the world looks like. And this map was very, very strange because it had Japan right in the middle of the map. And I said, that map is wrong. It's just wrong. Something wrong with it. And I was looking this way, looking that way. Then the manager came out. He was Japanese. Everything, his emotional connection, his connection to the map of the world was through Tokyo. That's where his wife was. That's where his children were. That's where his ships were. He was a shipping man. And so the point is that he and all of us, we see the world as it is. So then I was thinking about this in connection with whether I had done the right thing taking up this Krishna Bhakti Yoga. Are we all okay? We're okay? Not too boring. Okay. So what happened then was I learned that there was a lot of shipwrecks. We might not get some fresh air in here. There was a lot of shipwrecks because they didn't have the right sort of compass on board. And what they needed was a clock that would not be affected by the up and down of the waves. So there was a competition. And the competition was run in England in a place called Greenwich. It was a naval college in Greenwich. So somebody called John Harrison, he came up with a clock that would run anywhere in the world on board ship and then save the lives of thousands and thousands of sailors.
That's why it's hot.
So then, from those days, in the middle of the 1800s, it just so happened that Greenwich then became zero on the longitude of the world. And anything east of that became the east, and anything to the west of that became the west. So Hong Kong and China then became the Far East, labeled by the British, by my ancestors, as the Far East. Far East of what? London. And in between London and the Far, you'll catch where I'm going. In between London and the Far East was something called the Middle East. You see? Anything open. So, when we say that bhakti is an Eastern set of ideas, we're really giving it a label that has no relevance in a world that's round. Because in China, the other word for Buddhism, is what? The Western religion. Now, when you think of Buddhism, what do you think? Eastern religion or Western religion? Eastern. But the Chinese call it a Western religion because it came out of India to China. So I'm just saying that these ideas that we are presenting in the Bhakti tradition should not be thought of as Eastern or Western, but just ideas. Just ideas. And they're relevant to us. So, back to Vinod's considerations. So when we are trying to expand our consciousness, the only question is how best to do it. And the secrets are all there in the Yoga Sutras. And as good yogis, you will have a look at those 195 verses of the Yoga Sutras. And the technique is given in the beginning. All yoga techniques begin with disciplining the mind, because the mind is doing this projection. So, first thing, stop projecting. So Patanjali Muni says the first thing is, what's the first thing? First thing? Huh? Chitta, yeah. That the end goal of yoga is reached when the mind stops fluctuating, when you reach a state of samadhi. But when he comes to his yam and niyam principles, the first thing he says is ahimsa. One commentator has written, he said there are many animals in the forest, and they all leave different footprints: leopard, the cheetah, the squirrel, the deer. But the biggest footprint is the elephant. So the first principle that Patanjali Muni recommends is ahimsa, or non-violence. This is the elephant footprint that covers all the other little footprints. Because himsa, or violence to others, is caused by the tendency to see others as a possible source of enjoyment. Therefore, I must control. These two things, ishcha, dvesha, desire and hatred. I must enjoy, therefore I must control or use. So this exploitation, stop it. He says, just stop it, drop it, put it down. Ahimsa. And the next one,
Satya.
words for you. Satya, or truthfulness. So these are all principles. One must be true to oneself. One must speak truth to others. Because the tendency is to juggle with speech so that we always come out the best. Truthfulness is always the best part. See, all these principles are restrictions. That's a difficult one to restrict. But they're not restrictions by someone else. They're voluntary restrictions. The things that you take on. The doctor says, I'm afraid you'll have to. He's smoking 60 cigarettes a day. He's come to the doctor saying, I'm a bit short of breath. And the doctor says, would you like me to tell you why you're short of breath? He says, yes. You'll have to give up smoking. The man says, I'll cut down. No, the doctor says, you have to stop. The man says, well, I'll try to stop. The doctor says, no, that's not good. You must stop completely. So in this way, Patanjali Muni, if we follow his advice, and Yoga Sutras is a technique handbook. See what we're trying to do. Are we all right now for oxygen? Okay, maybe we could. What we're trying to do is Patanjali says that the mind is like a lake. The mind is like a lake. Samadhi means when the lake of the mind becomes still and peaceful. What we're dealing with right now is a lake that's agitated. Just like we're agitating this room with wind, called air conditioning. It's a rushing wind. Actually, the definition of nirvana that we're all trying to reach someday, nirvana means no more wind, no more air conditioning. The wind is moving the waves of the world in which we live. That's yoga. That's yoga. We reach samadhi. That's it. So where are these disturbances on the lake of the mind coming from? They're coming from two areas. One is the wind that's blowing the surface and causing ripples. And the other secret is that at the bottom of the lake there's rotting leaves. The rotting leaves are releasing methane. And the methane is bubbling up as bubbles of gas and popping on the surface. And they're also causing ripples every time a bubble pops on the surface of the lake. So the ripples are coming from disturbances in this life, and the methane gas is disturbances from your past life. Our past life was either a good life or a bad life, or a mixture, and usually a mixture. But it leaves a residue, it leaves a shadow, it leaves an overlap. And sometimes what we do in this life is we're trying to carry on with our last life. We lost our love too soon. We had a good job, we lost it too soon. Okay. We were strong, we lost that. Now I want to carry on. But now the soul has another incarnation. The soul has another body to deal with. Or in my last life I was female. In this life I'd like to carry that on, please. That was a good life for me. Oh, okay. You mean I can't carry that life on? Well, let me try and carry both on. It leads to sometimes confusion. So we have to resist the temptation to lead our shadow life, our last life, and to deal with the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and to create no more problems in this life that will create more bubbles. So Patanjali Muni is calling for that. So ahimsa satya. And then asteya. No, don't steal. Don't take anything that's anybody else's. Don't take anybody else's ideas and call them your own. Copyright them. When they went, we British were after this, but when they went out in the streets of America and they did a survey, they asked people, which is worse, murder or copyright theft? What do you think won?
Copyright.
Copyright theft, of course. Copyright theft, because you're taking everything from someone. So all these things are restrictions, but they're voluntary restrictions that lead to purifying that desire to exploit this plane of existence. So the restrictions and then the obligations, the good things that we do. We practice cleanliness, shocha, santosh, practice contentment. I'm content with what I have. Would you like this? Would you like that? No. Stand out of the sunshine. You're blocking the sun. Dharmajani says, Atmarama, be like that. Or at least aspire, or live simply. And swadhyaya. Swadhyaya means to study texts. Adhyaya means a chapter. Swa means oneself, self-study. That doesn't mean inspecting yourself, it means study the text. That text will help you understand where you are on that path. And so, finally we have tapaha. Tapaha means tapasya. It means giving up, seeing this is not mine, this is not mine, this does not belong to me, I shall not have this. Then you think to yourself, well, what do I have if I don't have this, this, and this? At the same time as you're embarking on that process, it should also be spiritual enjoyment. See, Bhagavad Gita explains that there must be param drishtra. Drishtra means a taste for something. But there must be param uppermost. Otherwise you cannot. It's like when you're trying to get a baby, sometimes a baby or a toddler, they pick up a piece of glass or something that's going to hurt them. You try to get it off them, what do? They just squeeze it even tighter. But if you dangle something that they're interested in front of them, they drop that very easily. They want it. So we need that enjoyment, that higher enjoyment, that paramdrishta, that higher taste. And then comes Ishvara Pranidhan. Ishvara Pranidhan. We talked about this the other night. Pranidhan means prana, I give. Dhan, I give. Pranidhan, give my life, give my breath to that. Ishvara. Oh, what is that Ishvara? That you discover later on in the Yoga Sutras. But in Bhagavad Gita we find Krishna says, Brahmanai Prachishta. Krishna, this loving source of all affection, that is the source of the divine white light talked about in the Upanishads. It's something very joyful to come into the company of. And the processes of bhakti bring us nearer and nearer. A simple form of that is the recitation of the names of the divine. How many names? What names? Take your pick. There are Sahasrana. It's an ancient scripture. It was spoken by a great warrior. As he lay dying, he'd been penetrated by hundreds of arrows, but he had a great blessing. And his blessing was that he could give up his life only at the time of his choosing. He could choose when the soul would leave the body. So even though he was almost bled dry and he was pierced by many hundreds of arrows, he waited until Krishna could come. When Krishna stood at his side, and the great king who was to lead the new world was standing on the other side, then he gave this beautiful text known as the Vishnu Sahasranam, or the 1,000 names of the divine. There's 1,000 names of the divine. You can take any one of those and recite it. And it works. And there's no cost, no charge. No one can hold on to your breath and say, hey, don't say that. In the privacy of your home, you can do yoga and no one will stop you. Okay? In some countries they will. Some countries. That's why this is a perfect country for yoga. Because it's the country where freedom and freedom of your speech is highly valued. Never take it for granted. It's something to be guarded. Gradually, in my country, in Britain, there are more and more restrictions. More and more restrictions. Sometimes now you cannot say what you believe, and you cannot say even what you know to be true. You'll find a knock at the door coming. And they're not secret police. They're not secret, we don't have secret police. Just ordinary police enforcing the law as it comes from on high. So I'll stop there, but I will say that value your freedom of speech. Because speech is something that is most important on the path of bhakti. It's a recitation. And a great king, he once said, well, how does it work? Because thousands of years ago he had the question that I know is in your mind too. He said, my tongue is a muscle in my mouth. And it vibrates and it makes a sound. It makes words. The air is also material. So the tongue is material, the air is material. My ear is also material. So material. Which part is spiritual? Which part is spiritual? How can it be spiritual? If it's a material tongue, material ear, material air vibrating. And the answer is that the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Consciousness, is everything. We are part of that. Except that which is not part of it is consciousness. Ultimately, there is no shadow if we do not turn away from the sun. As soon as you turn away from the sun, you see the shadow world. But as soon as we recite the names of the divine, Nama Namino, the name of the divine is the same as the divine. Because the divine is existing in all aspects. So this very, very powerful transformation of material sound into spiritual sound acts instantaneously. So whether we are reciting gently, and of course this mantra here, the Hare Krishna Hare Rama mantra, has been experienced by millions, if not billions of people for thousands of years, and it's now available right here in Nashville. As sung by Prabhuji. We're very grateful that you've started this wonderful place in Nashville. Let's give them a round of applause. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was a great acharya of spreading the names of God, he says, wherever someone takes the trouble to set up a group for the recitation of the name of God, they should know that I will be there with them. I'll be empowering them. So you're connected. I feel his hand upon you. So, the recitation of these names, this mantra, there are many mantras, but this mantra is particularly easy, particularly potent, particularly helpful. And it will be your good friend if you recite it with or without musical instruments. With or without musical instruments. You can recite it by yourself, it's known as japa. Japa means a silent recitation. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Or it can be recited, sung very loudly, honky-tonk fashion, country western fashion, rock and roll fashion, everything fashion. My wife and I, we've been vegetarians for a long time. We 40, 50 years, that's right, more than 50 years. So we practiced ahimsa for a long time, and one time there was a rock and roll group known as Def Leppard from England. Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
You've heard of them here?
Yeah.
Really? But they're English.
Yeah.
You know the Beatles as well. Isn't that amazing? They know so much of it. Anyway, the drummer had a terrible accident. So my wife and I were invited to come and cook for particularly the drummer, but for the rest of the band as well. This was in 1984, and we lived with them for a month, and we cooked every day. I've still got the menu, and Rick, who was the drummer, he was Brigham, or Richard as we used to call him at that time. When they came over to America, he became Rick. Before he was Richard. Anyway, he was very, very grateful. And in a recent interview, he still remembers us as the Hare Krishna couple who came and cooked for him when he was sick. Many years later, he walked into a store and he heard the Hare Krishna mantra being sung. And it just stunned him, he said. And he turned around and he looked at his wife, who was there at the time. And tears were rolling down her cheeks. She looked at him, and he had tears rolling down his cheeks because he just remembered. So it was nice to be remembered and nice to think that we touched his life in such a way. This Hare Krishna mantra is wonderful because it touches many musicians so close, touches people who are non-musical, touches people who are in politics, religion, academia, touches shopkeepers, people who travel, people in the military, people in the police, even the police. Touches everybody.
Pour some of Krishna's mercy on me. We need it now.
I don't know anybody knew that here.
That's the best I've ever song.
Of course it is. Krishna's mercy. Well, interestingly enough, their manager, who was Mutt Lange, he was also a vegetarian, he also meditated, he also believed in Radha Krishna because he was part of a group called the Radha Swami Sangha. And he later went on to look after your country western girl, marry her, she now is 20. So we have many secret chanters of the Hare Krishna mantra all over the world. And the interesting thing for me is that even in moments of doubt, when I, as a British man, think, well, I've taken up something which my mother would call, an Eastern religion, I think to myself, well, no longer, because everywhere, whether it's Kansas or Canada, I used to live in Africa. You know Africa? It's a country. Actually, it's a continent. I'm just checking. Americans. I mean, I know. This is a country where you can have an international baseball competition, and the only teams are from America. So, I was in Africa for 2 years in a place called Kenya. And one day I was up near a place called Lake Victoria, and we were going, as missionaries do, Hare Krishna missionaries, going to hut, came into one man's hut, just a grass straw hut, literally, just like you've seen in the movies, people not wearing much, don't really have to wear much, but on the wall of his hut, on the inside of that was a picture of Krishna. I said, where did you get this? And he told me something. He said, why do you have this here? He says, I like it. He said, and I like the singing. How does it go? He says, Hare Christina, Hare Christina, Christina, Christina. Yeah, that'll do. All right, my dear friends, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me into your sacred space today. I shall go home to England filled with stories of how kind the people of Nashville were. Thank you. Now, would you like to sing? Me sing? I don't think so. All right. Let's move a little bit. Should we move a little bit? Let's stand up. I'm best when I'm standing. Pull me up. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So, in future incarnations of this group, I hope that you will be able to bring along your musical instruments